Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I am Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan, and we post a video every Friday. So why not subscribe and press the alert button so that you'll know what's happening every week.
And if you have a burning horticultural question for Stephen Ryan, put it in the comments below, say where you're from, and we will try and answer it. He will, in 60 seconds every Monday.
Yes, I'll do my best. And of course, if you're a keen horticulturalist and probably in Australia...
Why wouldn't you be?
Yeah, you might consider joining the Royal Horticultural Society of Victoria.
Yes.
They have a wonderful magazine, for which I write, and they also have all sorts of events and things going on. So why not join?
And a wonderful patron, I heard, who can be tricky.
Yes, well, and that could be me as well. So there you go.
But now, Stephen, this is a brisk spring morning.
Yes.
I smell my childhood. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Where are we?
Well, we're at a Botanic Gardens, a comparatively new one.
Yes.
In the western suburbs area of Melbourne, or just west of the western suburbs of Melbourne, in a town called Melton.
Yes.
And Melton is a very dry, comparatively flat, heavy clay soiled area in a rain shadow.
Sounds like gardening heaven, Stephen.
Yes, well, it's an interesting area for gardening because it throws up all sorts of challenges. That's part of what this Botanic Gardens is all about.
So here we are in Melton Botanic Gardens. What are we going to be looking at, though, today specifically?
All right, well, there's lots of things to look at, and I'm sure we're going to revisit this place in due course.
Yes.
But today's topic is about eucalyptus, and it's about... Well, here we have one here prepared earlier, and it's about those eucalypts that could in fact make good garden plants in an average sized garden. So the smaller, daintier eucalypts, the things that aren't growing into great forest giants.
I was going to say dainty is not a word I associate with eucalypts, but anyway, and well, we won't get into it too much, but the one behind us, what is this?
This is Eucalyptus rhodantha from Western Australia, and it has the most outrageous flowers and the most fabulous silver foliage, and it's only it's a shrub. It's not even, has no delusions to being a tree at all.
But we'll get into the form, the flowers and the use later on. But
Yep.
I think before we go any further, let's take a wander and just talk more about eucalypts in general.
What a good idea.
All right, Stephen, so let's, for my sake,
Yeah.
and some of our audience, Eucalypt 101. So tell me about the genus as a whole.
All right. Well, for a start, it has been split up over the years. So,
Oh.
yes, there's now accepted 3 genera that you would consider as once upon a time being eucalypts. So
Yeah.
there's Eucalyptus itself, which is the larger one.
Yeah.
And there's more than 750 accepted species there.
Yeah.
There is Corymbia, which includes the scarlet flowering gum from Western Australia and many others.
Oh.
And the Corymbia genus consists of around about 90 odd species.
Yeah.
And Angophora, which was split off from Eucalypt some time ago, and there's about 10 of those.
Right.
So the whole sort of gum tree thing is quite large. So there's probably pushing on towards about 1,000 species, and they're basically all continental Australian. There's 1 or 2 species that extend into New Guinea,
Yeah.
but they're the same species known on mainland Australia. And there's 1 eucalypt that doesn't belong in Australia at all.
And it's our old friend.
Yes, Eucalyptus diglupta from the Philippines. So
Which is commonly called the rainbow gum,
Yep.
and we've covered that in 2 stories actually.
Yes.
One in the Melbourne Botanic Gardens and one in the University of Melbourne Garden.
yes, in the system garden.
Yeah.
So so it's a huge genus, and it has evolved to cover almost every niche known to man.
Yep.
So we have high alpine ones.
Yep.
We have desert dwelling ones. We have Mediterranean climate ones.
Yep.
We have tropical ones. So virtually every part of Australia has its cotia of eucalyptus species.
And I suppose too, they have a bit of a bad rap in certain parts of the world as they've now become weedy. I mean, in California, in
Yeah.
North Africa.
Look, that's
parts of
bound to
Asia.
happen where things are happy, where you've put them.
Don't get too happy.
Yeah, that can be an issue where you're taking plants out of their natural habitat. I have to say the eucalypts we're going to talk about today, I don't believe any of them have found a niche where they've taken off. So
Well, let's talk about that specifically. So you mentioned earlier in the intro the climate. So the
Yeah.
microclimate here is dry Mediterranean.
Yes, it is. The Melton area is in a rain shadow, so it has very low rain per year, about 400 mils a year. And so the eucalypts that have been selected for the gardens here are those that grow naturally in those low rainfall areas. And a lot of them, because they do come from a very low rainfall area, also quite often poor soils, are also not particularly big growing. So it makes them actually really good small to moderate garden trees. So that's what we're all about.
And I think we're lucky, it's early spring here in Australia, and many of them, but not all of them, bloom at this time of year.
Yeah, there's some very spectacular ones that we will be introduced to. So
Yes.
I'm looking forward to having a look at some.
But I think what we're now going to go and do is meet Barb, who is the guru of all things dry, small growing eucalypts.
So we could call her the gum guru.
Okay, Stephen, let's go and find the gum guru.
Let's do that. All right, so here we are. We've found our Eucalypt specialists, Barb and David Pye,
Hello, Barb. Hello, David.
and they're going to talk us through what happened here. So, but before we start, what have I got in my hand here, Barb?
You've got Eucalyptus woodwardii, which comes from very, very dry part of Australia,
Goodness me. So over in the west.
in Western
Yeah.
Australia.
Yes, it's remarkable. Wonderful yellow flowers, fabulous silvery buds, and a very elegant weeping habit. So I think this one would make a good tree for
It would.
lots of people.
But I guess my question is, how did this begin for you, this interest? Was it interest in native plants, particularly eucalypts particularly? Where did that begin for you?
So we've always been interested in natives, and then we heard this garden was going to be established. There was a master plan drawn up, and it had a eucalyptus arboretum in quite a big area of the garden. So we thought, well, we'd better find out a lot about eucalypts, particularly ones from dry country like Melton.
Yes, this is sort of odd because it's in the midst of Victoria, but it is in a dry area that actually aligns with quite a lot of parts of Western Australia and South Australia and what have you. So it's really quite an odd thing.
So how did you go about choosing what things to find to plant in this garden?
So we looked up, there's a Eucalypt program called Euclid. So Euclid had just been brought out, and it has got all the eucalypts in Australia. So I looked through them, and I looked through to see which ones came from an area similar to this.
Yeah.
Rainfall quite low, and most of them came from Western Australia. There were some from South Australia and some from drier parts of Victoria. So then I went through and I chose ones that I thought looked nice, and I found.
So pretty counts.
This is Barb's garden.
Then I went to, there's a big seed company in Western Australia called Nindathana, and they sold most of the seeds in little packets.
So everything was seed grown.
Everything was seed grown.
Goodness.
Well, the eucalypts you can't grow any other
Yeah,
way, really.
that's it, isn't it? Really, they're now grafting some of the cultivars, but really, seed raising is the only way.
That's right. They don't grow from cuttings well, so it was seed. So the seed raising took place at our place because there was nothing here in October 2010, and by 2011 we had them about this high.
So ready to
forestry
plant.
tube,
Yeah.
ready to plant. We prepared the site, and we did have it ripped too by a contract guy.
And did you have a watering program that first year, or were they make it or
We
don't?
planted them in winter, and fortunately it was quite that 2011 summer was quite wet, remember?
Yes, I do remember
So
it
we
quite
didn't
well.
have to do a lot of watering. It was very fortunate, and they pretty much all grew. So we had nearly 100 species.
All right, so I love doing this because it puts people on the spot, but have you got a favourite eucalypt that you've raised that we should go out and hunt for?
Yes, there's one. It's called Eucalyptus rhodantha. Beautiful grey foliage and stunning red flowers.
So what would you say is one of the rarest eucalypts in the collection? Because we've got to visit that.
Yes.
Eucalyptus Sandra,
And where does that one come from, David?
Western Australia.
Again, yes. So it is a hotspot, is it not, for this
Absolutely.
genus?
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you both for your time. It's amazing here. So Stephen and I are going to go and roam about, find your two favourite and rarest eucalypts, and anything else.
And look at some that we might like as well.
Because a few, I must say, to contextualize all this, I am feeling a little triggered because I was a teenager in Western Australia. So for me, it's 1984 and I'm not studying for my end of year exams. Just the smell and the colors.
Yeah.
It's my 80s teenage childhood.
Excellent.
Well, there we go. For better or for worse. All right, Stephen, let's go.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you, Barb. Thank you, David. How amazing that everything was grown from seed.
Yes, well, it's the only way to go with eucalyptus, but there you go.
are.
Now, I thought we're going to go around and just see which ones really tickle our fancy, so to speak.
Yes, many have tickled mine.
Yeah, now I have to say we should probably break this up into categories so that
Yes.
we can see the diversity and interest in this group. So
Yeah.
we'll look at some that have particularly good foliage.
Yeah.
We'll look at some that have particularly beautiful bark, and I might add some of these things might cross over.
Yeah.
Stunningly beautiful flowers, beautiful gum nuts. So there's a whole range. Oh, and of course form. So
Yeah.
the shape the tree grows to as well. So there's all those different characteristics that eucalypts can impart into a garden.
And all of the ones we're looking at really are ideal for smaller gardens.
Yeah.
Obviously, though, if you've got the right climate, because these are all dry Mediterranean species. that we're
Yes,
looking at.
exactly. So we're not going to grow these in Canada, and we're certainly not going to grow these probably in Florida. So,
But probably California,
yeah,
parts of drier central
Texas or
United
through that
States,
area, down into Mexico,
Mediterranean
all around the
basin.
Mediterranean basin,
South Africa.
Chile, central parts of Chile. So there's plenty of parts of the world with that Mediterranean style climate where these trees should be perfect, as long as they also have a well-drained soil, because
Yes.
that tends to be important with most of them.
Yes.
They all come from either sandy or gravelly type soils in the wild.
Yes. All right. So what is this very structural beauty before us? And the first thing that strikes me, these leaves are like, well,
Well, they're like leather.
they're like really hard leather.
Yeah, so this is actually a quite rare eucalypt. It's on the vulnerable list. This is from the Fitzgerald National Park in Western Australia.
Yeah.
Very low rainfall area, which sort of seems odd because it's got such big leaves.
I know. Well, yes. I'm just going to say Fitzgerald. I will drop in a map, but it's southern, eastern, Western Australia.
Yeah, there you go. So that just complicates the issue again.
I'll show you on a map.
Now this has lots going for it. It's a small tree, probably about 5 metres tall. It's called the four-winged mallet, and that is because the stems are actually basically square or rectangular.
That's so
See that?
interesting.
Yeah, so you've got these weird sort of lines down the stem.
And just looking at the leaf and the structure, to my very untrained eye, it looks like it should be a tropical plant. Do you
It
think?
doesn't look dry climate. I mean,
No.
big leaves and dry climate don't seem to go together. But the other things about this plant, it has very large flowers. This one's not in bloom, but it's got some buds way up the top. Huge pink flowers on it, so it's very showy in bloom.
Yeah.
And it covers 3 of our things, in fact, because it also gets beautiful, smooth grey bark. So it covers lots of the characteristics that we're looking at today.
Yeah. And I guess too, the other thing which is going to be consistent with all of these trees is that they're not common
Yeah.
because they're in the botanic garden. Many of them are endangered. But as Barb pointed out, the seeds are available, and seeds are some of the easiest things to transport around the
Yeah.
world. I mean, not into Australia, but out of Australia.
Yes.
So I'll certainly put the website below, and anyone around the world in the right climate who wants to try and grow these can have a go.
Yes, why not indeed?
All right, let's go on to the next one.
Why not indeed?
Well, we found Barb's favourite, and it was where we began. That was
Exactly.
a coincidence.
Yeah, it was rather. So here we've got Eucalyptus rhodantha, which means rose flowered, and it's called the rose Mal Eucalypt, and it's 3 metres tallish.
Oh, look, I'm just going to take that cap off. Oh, look.
Yeah, so you do know that eucalyptus means well covered, don't you?
No.
So that's where it comes from the flower cap.
Oh, which I've just dropped. Hang
Yeah,
on.
so there you go. There's another little bit of trivia for you. Yeah, so eucalyptus means well covered.
Well, how fascinating. So this, I think, covers 2 of our criteria.
Yes.
The amazing form of the leaves.
Yes, it's beautiful silvery
Quite
leaves, and
sharp.
note they have no leaf stem, so they're perfoliate. So there you go. So you've got these wonderful silvery leaves and these enormous pink flowers with the pale yellow pollen on the end. They are just beautiful. It's sort of a archy, rangy shrub, so it's
Yeah.
not a neat, tidy plant,
No.
but it has character of its own, and I think it's well worthwhile considering in the right climate.
And its native habitat is just north of Perth in Western Australia, south of Geraldton, in that area, which is quite a botanic hotspot.
Yeah, sort of the wheat belts sort of area, isn't it?
Yeah.
Beautiful plant. It's vulnerable in the wild.
Because of the wheat.
Yes, it could well be.
Gets cleared for cattle and wheat.
And of course, it is so ornamental that I'm sure it will hang on in cultivation no matter what happens in the wild, because it is just beautiful.
It really is stunning. And I guess it's early spring, but the bees are loving all of these eucalypts, but also they are pollinated and fed off by parrots.
Yes, a lot of the parrots will
by
use them.
native honey eaters.
Yes.
And also the Australian bats, flying foxes.
Yes, they'll have a go at it. So there's lots of different animals that will use the food source that these plants give.
Okay, we found Barb's favourite. Let's go and find some more.
All right.
Stephen Ryan, which one is this?
All right, well, this is David's selection as one of the rarest of the eucalypts.
Right.
So this is Eucalyptus Synandra. Again, comes from the wheat belt area of Western Australia.
Yep.
And it covers some of the things that we're interested in apart from its rarity, because it has beautiful bark, it has attractive flowers, gorgeous gum nuts.
Yeah,
They're
and
really cute.
looking at the nuts, it will be covered in flowers when
Yes.
it's in bloom.
Yes, and apparently in the wild it comes in multiple colours. So from what Barb tells me, this one is pink. And from the same seed packet, and if we move the camera around slightly,
Ta-da.
the tree just here behind me with a much more open, upright canopy,
Different form.
different form, same seed packet, and apparently white flowered. So you can see how diverse this plant is probably in the wild, what's left of it.
Yes, and I'll show you a shot of them in the same shot. They look completely different.
Yeah, I would have assumed two different species, to be honest, but there you go.
So it's unfortunate.
Oh my goodness, look at that. You've got this one here with its upright form and beautiful bark, and then its sister seedling sitting over here looking completely different.
It's unfortunate it's not in bloom, but never mind.
Yes.
Why don't we go and find something that is?
Yes.
All right, Stephen, I'm being triggered back to my teenage years.
All right, well, we're engaging now with Eucalyptus caesia,
Yeah.
which is also known as the gungaroo, and it comes from granite outcrops in southwest and Western Australia.
Yes, hence my triggering. So my teenage years were spent in Western Australia. And I think, is it fair to say that in the 80s, this became incredibly popular as a garden plant?
Yes, and it was sold everywhere as Silver Princess.
Yeah.
So they found a sort of a slightly naff name to give it to encourage people to plant it. And look, a well-grown one can be a quite spectacular plant because it has a beautiful open weeping habit.
Yeah.
The flowers are huge and showy from lovely buds, and it also gets very attractive gum nuts on it as well.
And this sort of silver,
Yes.
whatever it is,
Well,
on
it's sort of a silver powdery substance on the outside of things. It also has beautiful bark, but you don't often see it as a well-grown specimen. It's inclined to be a bit scruffy.
So this is my thing with a lot of these eucalypts, that you really have to be quite considered how you use them, because
Yeah.
they are scruffy. So these are not things for the very controlled, pruned, symmetrical garden, really.
They'd look very silly behind box hedging and white gravel with standard iceberg roses, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in the right aspect in a garden, they can be very spectacular. And I can sort of understand why this one became so popular. It's not a big tree, 5 metres or so would see it out. And look, it may not be an overly long-lived species, but then we'll go out and buy a punnet of tomatoes and only expect them to last a year. So I don't see that as a problem.
And I think for me, what I love is the contrast between the pink and the grey and the green.
Yes, there's something very trendy about grey and pink.
Oh, it's very, very beautiful.
Yeah, so there you go.
And the bark is sensational, actually.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful example there.
Yes, well, we must get a close-up of
We
that
shall,
one.
Mr.
Yes.
Right. All right, well, I have just revisited the mid-early 80s.
Yes.
Let's see what else we can
All
find.
right, good idea.
What's this silvery beauty?
Yes, well, another one of those wonderful Western Australian eucalypts. This one's commonly called a tallorac. It's Eucalyptus pleurocarpa. And again, it only grows to 3-4 metres or so tall. Apparently the flowers are white, but I have to say the gum nuts are pretty impressive.
And again,
anyway.
that beautiful silvery
Yes, that lovely sort of
powder.
powdery on them. Now, it's a sort of a rangy plant though.
Yeah.
But what they've done here is they've coppiced a couple of them down. So you can actually see what you can manipulate them to do.
So this is the thing, I guess the next question is, how would you use these in the garden? Now, they're quite thin, so they're not a dense canopy.
No.
So you could use them in a border, as long as it was a dry border, perhaps towards the back, but you could also have things around them and through them.
Yes, you could. And in fact, because they're reasonably open, you can even bring them slightly further forward in a border because you can see through them. So you can see other plants behind them. So if you're growing them in a natural way, you can use them in lots of different ways. But if you're not happy with their natural form, you don't have to stick with it. So coppicing.
Coppicing, and also obviously this is a botanic garden and it's, I guess, quite wild, so none of the trees are pruned or cleaned up. And obviously with a lot of them you can clear out the dead wood and tidy it up a bit, so it does look more.
Yes, you can have a little finesse.
Yes.
Yes. So this one I would grow in the garden, but I'd do exactly what they've done with the plants here. And every few years I'd coppice it down as a stump, and then I'd have it as this wonderful massive silver
And
foliage.
it's very structural. The nuts, the leaves, the silver stem, it's stunning plant.
Yes, beautiful thing.
All right, I think there's something I can see over there which is catching
Oh,
my
here we go. We're running from one spot to the next, but what can we do?
This was the eye catcher that we could see right from the other side. My goodness, what's this?
Well, this is the bell-fruited mallee, Eucalyptus preissiana.
Yeah.
And I guess we should describe what a mallee is, because it's a whole group of eucalypts.
Yes, and also parts of Australia are described as mallee country.
Yes, exactly, and due to the tree. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yeah.
Now, a mallee is a form of eucalypt that produces a woody lignotuber at the ground, and we'll go in and have a close look at this one, because it's doing exactly that.
Yeah.
In the areas where they grow, they often get burnt through by bushfires, and they will reshoot again from that lignotuber. So the whole plant can have its above ground parts burnt off, and then it will promptly shoot back again as soon as the fire's gone through. So it's a very, very useful technique to survive in areas where fires are very common.
And I think perhaps, is it fair to say too, the other evolutionary trick of eucalypts for fire is the peeling of the bark.
Yes, yes, it works in a couple of different ways actually. The peeling bark will often lay around at the base of the tree, which in fact is a very nice area to burn because it's quite high in volatile oils.
Yeah.
And of course the gum nuts will often explode after heat's been through. So the fire will come through, all the leaf litter and the tree itself will be singed off to ground level. The seed will then shed out of the gum nuts because they'll have been opened by the heat.
Yeah.
They'll fall to the ground. Hopefully within a very short span of time there'll be some rain, and that will start off the next generation of these trees as well. So this one is quite common around the southern parts of Western Australia, and I remember seeing some of it growing there when we were over in the Albany area 18 months ago, and it is a very showy species.
Beautiful. And again, not too big and great for a smaller garden.
Yeah, 3 to 4 meters in each direction and very prunable.
I was going to say too, I mean, you could actually just coppice it like the other one, which
Yeah.
achieves the same thing as burning the top off.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't recommend burning them down in your own garden, but yes, you could prune them down and start them off from the lignotuber again at a whim if you felt the need.
At a whim.
Yes. Well, this one really caught my attention.
Yes.
I hadn't come across this particular species before, but this comes from Western Australia, like most of the others we've looked at. And this one can come from quite dry, deserty areas, even into inland Western Australia. And it's Eucalyptus krueseana, which is the book-leafed mallee. And it's another one of those that have perfoliate leaves. It has no leaf stems.
Yeah.
And the flowers seem to form in large clusters, and they're almost a greeny yellow.
But not at the end of the stem.
No,
But the spot where
partway
they grow.
back. Yeah.
It's very beautiful. It looks incredible.
Yeah.
And I think this would be an amazing garden, shrubby,
Yes.
small tree.
Yeah, and I like the sort of tiered layered effect that
Yeah.
the tree creates quite naturally.
Yeah.
And if it was cleaned up a little bit, I think it would make a fabulous garden plant.
Yeah. Also, great sort of shreddy bark.
Yes, which again, with the removal of central twigs and things, you could show it off. I think it's got great potential in those sort of Mediterranean style gardens.
Fantastic. Well, I've loved coming to Melton Botanic Gardens.
Yes,
Stephen
and I
Ryan.
think it's a place that anybody who's within cooey of Melton should visit the Botanic Gardens here it's a huge resource, and it's not just all about eucalypts, I might add. There's a whole pile of other Australian native plants, plus there's areas with plants from other parts of the world. So anything that grows in a dry climate, they're trying to grow here.
Yeah, and it does look amazing. And it's, what, 12 years old?
Roundabout,
Yeah.
yes.
And it's already really mature and very interesting, and some fantastic native plants. So well worth the trip. Well, we have romped through small eucalypts in bloom. What could we possibly do next, Steve?
Well, I have to say I would have loved to have spent more time on them because they're a huge group, but nonetheless it gives people a taste. And what could we do next week? I don't know. We'll be somewhere else with engaging with another group of plants, undoubtedly.
Yes, and if you want to know exactly what we're doing next week, hit subscribe because we post every Friday. And housekeeping note, all the plants we mention in today's video you will find in the text below. If you can't see it immediately, hit read more and you can read more.
Well, exactly. And don't forget to comment. So if you've got a question, please ask the question. We will handle it in our Monday shorts, where I try and answer a question in 60 seconds or less.
Very, very eloquently. Well, that brings us to an end of our Eucalypt epic, Stephen. We look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.